Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good Stuff. I'm excited today to spend some time with our guest, and I know you're gonna get a lot from him. Real quick plug on our end: if you get a chance to head on over to YouTube, please subscribe to the Good Stuff with Kevin page. But without further ado, we have best-selling author of Lead for God's Sake, and also a speaker and teacher on leadership and cultural development, Todd Gongwer. Todd, it's great to have you.
Kevin, thank you so much. It's great to be here, man.
Yeah, before we dive in, like I told you, you got the best studio out of anybody, so congratulations. Looking good over there.
Thanks. Thanks. We're in crazy times, and so we've really tried to make some adjustments to make it the most comfortable we could possibly make it in terms of communicating with
Right.
teams and things we communicate with. So
Well, great. Well, hey, we're gonna have a positive, uplifting talk today because everybody needs that good stuff. And so,
yeah, man.
for those of you that Lead for God's Sake, I've read it twice. I'm actually on my third time right now at the book study with a group on Friday. So loving it again. So thanks for what you've done. If you have not read that, anybody, you got to get out and get it right away. Let's just dive in right away, Todd. Like, what led you to write this book?
Well, it was kind of a number of things. It was, I mean, like, my life growing up, I was a part of a family business. So I've always been in and around the business world. I mean, even since a young age. So I loved, business stuff. And even, fast forward into the 90s when I was an assistant college basketball coach for small college. But during that time, because it's an NAIA D2 school, I keep my day job. So I was in the business world. I've never left really the business world. And so kind of running parallel in the sports world and the business world, I became just passionate about leadership and, really out of necessity more than anything else. I wanted to learn more. What is it? What are the secrets? How can I help these people that have given the opportunity to lead be better leaders and impact their teammates in a better way? And so, started studying it and then applying those things in both the sports, with the team and with the businesses that I was working, at that time doing. And then from that moment, when actually in early 2000s, when I stepped away from the coaching world, went into private equity owned company, about a $250 million company, kind of to lead a cultural transformation, leadership development, cultural transformation there. We were eventually bought by our largest competitor, which was a public company. So I was able to do the whole gamut in the business world: small business, owning business, private equity owned, public. And then, great experiences in the coaching world. Once I got out of official coaching, I've coached hundreds and hundreds of youth sports games, both for my son and daughter, in basketball, soccer, baseball. So lots of experiences in both those worlds. And, I was just really, I had kind of just a real rock bottom experience in 2002, kind of opened my eyes to this bigger why in my life. And the next 7 years, the journey, the things that God laid on my heart, I just really started to have people going, Todd, you have to share this in a book. And I began to really feel that. And not until 2009 was I actually in a season where I felt God had me like, you're supposed to write now, Todd. Yeah. So, but even then, when I started, I thought it was supposed to be, some step 1, step 2, step 3, leadership book. And I started, I had to come to peace with my motives. I wanted my kids to have something if anything should ever happen to me. And I had friends in the business world from those experiences, friends in the sports world that I felt like they were pursuing all kinds of great things at the expense of the most important things. So really that was probably as much as any of the concepts in leadership, this why are you here on this earth? And are you really pursuing things in line with it? That's what drove me more than anything else. I felt called to share some of these philosophies. Yeah. And then eventually, the book I was trying to write didn't come out right. Felt God saying, start over a short story. Didn't have a clue how to write fiction, but felt like that's what I was supposed to do. So I started, and then it just poured out, and I felt like God just did it. And from there, it's been a whirlwind the last 10 years following that journey. So crazy experience.
Yeah, for sure. Amen to that. But I guess for the people that aren't listening, who is this book for? What's the audience? Who could read it and who could be impacted by it?
it's that's kind of crazy because when I wrote it, I thought, man, I'm going to target this at the, I was 40 at the time that I started, or, that I actually wrote it. And I thought I'm going to, target the midlife person going after, driven to pursue whatever it is, losing sight of the most important things. But the reality was, as the story came out and as it started to go out, and I started getting notes from people that were, both in the sports world, outside of the sports world. I was getting notes from athletes. I was getting notes from kids that weren't in any athletics, coaches, school teachers, pastors, business bus drivers. It was so much broader because, again, when you think about the purpose thing, why do I do what I do? Why am I really here? But that's a question that, you really kind of start to ask maybe when you're in high school at some point. You think about it a little bit. Now, you don't maybe think about it as deep, but especially late high school, and definitely in college. And from there on out, you're thinking about it. Like every once in a while, it's like, why am I doing this? Why do I really want to, why am I here on this earth? You want to find the answer to that. And so this appeal is really broad, I think, because it takes you through a story where, typically a lot of people, they can relate to the kids, they can relate to the parent, they can relate to the business, they can relate to the, somebody, the janitor, the business person, husband, wife, whatever, because it's about relationship dynamics and pursuits, which is things that we're all going through every day.
Yeah, or relate to all of them, maybe, like I can.
And myself too.
Yeah,
I
for
really,
sure.
the kid. I mean, I can pinpoint my life, and then Joe, of course, he's who I want to be. So he's the only one
sure.
I'm trying to relate to and continue to pursue.
To strive, fall short on, and it's like you said something. I think it goes back to that quote. It's like the two most important days of your life are the day you're born, and the day you figure out why. Right? I mean, that's
right.
That's a big thing. So, if you've heard this probably once, I'm assuming you've heard it thousands of times. But when I look at the title as a coach all my life, I think of lead for God's sake, versus, it's lead for God's sake. Can you explain the difference in that when you hear that?
Oh man, yeah, that was and again, that was kind of another really cool part of the story because I felt that title, on my heart a year and a half prior to writing it. I mean, I knew that was going to be the title, and I didn't even know what the story was going to be about. I didn't even know how I was going to write it yet. And so to watch it, like you mentioned it, the story actually follows that theme and takes you to that place to see the difference. And, I think we all, again, when we're going after our pursuits, the tendency is, come on, people. And we're always pointing fingers. And I mean, like in our society today, I mean, like this is something I've been near and dear to my heart for student athletes, coaches, everybody. Probably more in the last 3 years, especially than any other time, because I just feel like we're doing kids a disservice by how much blaming. And so there's this mindset when something's going wrong, lead for God's sake, like these kids, these coaches, these parents, I mean, like whoever it is in our life, we always want to go there in frustration for what they're doing, who they are, why they're, and the reality is we find out if we're really leading for God's sake, we need to start in our own hearts.
Yes.
We need to start with our own, how are we forgiving others around us? And what are we taking responsibility for in terms of the bad, tough things that are happening around us? So, that's kind of the journey that you follow or that you get to go on with that book, in that title.
I remember somebody telling me once, and I feel like I use it on my kids now, point the thumb and not the finger, but, and I know you answered some of this already, but like, what does lead for God's sake mean to you? Like, if you could dig a little deeper, and how can leaders, how can they utilize this in their positions, whether that's coach, whether that's the head of a business, head of a church, whatever it might be?
Yeah, well, I think, first and foremost, I go to this thing of, when you understand what leadership really is, and it begins with your influence. I mean, I know there's all kinds of definitions that we could talk about for a half a day, of course, but the reality is that baseline starts with how am I moving these people around me that God's put in my path. And when we talk about leading for God's sake, that's another level to me, the greatest, the level the ultimate level, I should say. And that is meaning that the way that we move people should always be for his purposes. And so every word, every attitude, every behavior that we display to try to get somebody to do something, it shouldn't be for me. It should be for him, for his purpose. Now scripture, Matthew tells us, let your light so shine so that they see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. What does that mean? That means shine your light, do your work, do the things that you do, but ultimately that they look at you, no, that they look at you, but they go, wow, God's really leading him or her in that situation. So, and I think that's, just such a huge part of the leadership that those of us that claim to be followers of Christ. Again, that's what it means to lead for God's sake, is to make sure that it's not about me. It's about him and all those people that he's put in my life to impact, build a relationship, and ultimately love for the purpose of Christ.
Yeah, love it. Thanks for that answer, Todd. That's awesome. What would you say are some common struggles, if you will, that leaders face, or challenges that exist for them that you've seen?
Well, I think, man, number one, and again, it's the world we're in. More and more, I think one of the biggest ones is really finding whatever it is that we've contributed to in terms of the problems that are going on around us, and owning that, taking responsibility. There's a picture in the book at one point, where Joe's talking about the stick man, and he says, leadership is 1 part influence, 2 parts responsibility. And I just think that that's such a huge, there's a huge void there in our society. Little Johnny gets a C on the report card, and what do? It's the teacher's fault. It's not little Johnny's fault. The kid's not playing enough. Whose fault is it? It's, of course, the coach's fault. Now, here's the thing that I tell coaches all the time, because I work with coaches, athletic directors. Listen, there's a lot of times where the coach is dead wrong. There's a lot of times where the teacher's dead wrong. So there's responsibility to be passed around. I tell people all the time, we don't have a coach problem, a parent problem, a kid problem, or an administrative problem. We have a heart problem. And it's throughout our entire society. All you have to do is turn the TV on, and you see that we have a heart problem. And everybody wants to go like this. Nobody wants to go, help me. Where can I own here? And how can I remove the plank from my own eye first before I try to help others or tell others what they need to do to remove their speck? And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, especially in our society today, because it's just not something that, people talk about it. We talk about responsibility, but I don't know, I'm not seeing a ton of it. And the other thing is I would say just flat out truly operating in a selfless level. There's so much talked about in servant leadership. I love the concept, and I love the fact that people talk about it, but the reality is, there's servant leadership isn't always completely selfish or selfless, I should say.
Yeah, right.
Because it works. And so a lot of times in a business, man, if I serve my team well, they'll serve me,
Yeah.
And the reality, that's not all wrong in and of itself, but if that's the main reason you're serving, you're missing it. You're missing it because, we're called, again, to be selfless. We're called to really make it, how can we lift these others up? And I think when you look at some of the most successful teams out there that have built the cultures truly on the right things, at the core, one of their foundations is always that selflessness, where they really understand what it means I've got to give myself for my teammates. It really cannot be about me.
Yeah,
so I think
that's great.
Those are 2 big ones.
Yeah, before you got in that second one, I was just going to say, it sounds like you're talking about servant leadership. And I wish that was something that I knew about a lot younger in my career. And I think a lot of people that are listening, if there's one thing I'd even recommend to echo, that is, less of you and more about others, and serving people. That'll make a huge difference in your leadership. And you being around some top-notch leaders now, Todd, have you noticed 1 or 2 things? Maybe they're the same that you just answered. Maybe there's something else. But have you noticed 1 or 2 things that are a separator for them and what they do?
I think probably, the 2 things that probably jump out at my mind on the leaders that I've been around that have built the most amazing cultures, or actually there's three. The number one thing, there's a genuine humility about them. I think,
Yeah.
again, this is another thing that we're continuing to lose sight of what it really means. There's so much in our culture that's pointing us to, it's got to be about you get yours. If you got to make sure you prove you're right. You got to make sure you build your brand. You got to, all these things. And so many of these things go directly in the face of the humility that we're called to. And so the most elite guys that I've been around and the guys that have built the most amazing cultures, when it comes right down to it, and it's in their own ways, but there's a humility about them, man. They know they're not God. That's the biggest difference between some of the successful ones I've been around that may not have that humble. They still are confused sometimes as to whether they're God or there is a God. So, but the humble ones get it. I think there's a perspective about them that it is always about the very longest term perspective possible. And I believe that means it's an eternal perspective.
Yeah.
So I don't just care about you for this season, and I don't just care about you for this lifetime. I want you to ultimately find the answer that, from an eternal perspective, and that'll impact you eternally and impact your family and generations after you, legacy stuff. And then the last one is really just walking, and I think it's a result of those two things too, is being able to walk in peace, peace with the process, peace with what they're doing. These are not the guys, and it's not saying that they're not intense, but when you spend time around these people, or you spend time around people that work for these people, the common thread that you're going to see and hear is always going to be, they have a lot of peace for what they're pursuing and how they're going about it and what they're doing. And you watch them on the sideline, it doesn't there are some coaches that I watch, and I swear, like any moment, their head is just going to pop. You know what I mean? It's just,
I know. Explode. I was guilty.
It's going to explode because they're just like, and you're almost just like you don't control all these things. You're not going to. Peace, man. You've done but there's some that just don't operate that way. There's others. And again, that doesn't mean you can't be intense. You can be intense, but there's this underlying piece about that intensity that I truly believe. When I watch Dabo Sweeney, I believe, and the dude's hopping all over, jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
But like the dude he's walking in peace.
Yeah.
You can see it. And he's celebrating. And when things go wrong,
yep,
he handles it with grace. So he's got peace in the process that he's pursuing. And I think that's a pretty powerful indicator.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you worked with Virginia and Tony Bennett. I have a buddy on staff there, and I think of him as well with this. He was on here a couple episodes ago and just talking about the pillars of those programs, and it just that really resonates. It's really, really good stuff.
For sure.
I mean, this book's taken you a lot of places. You talk about just these two coaches that we speak of, and introduced you to a lot of people. What have some of your greatest experiences been?
Well, you just mentioned, but we just talked about two of the by far greatest ones. I mean,
right.
I tell people all the time, I said, there's a lot of coaches. Very rarely do I come across a coach that's read it that it didn't speak to, the book didn't speak to in some way. There's a lot of guys out there. The majority of guys, it's like, man, this hit me. You wrote this about me. I was him. I was, most of the coaches are in that category. I would tell you that both Dabo and Tony, when they read it, they were like, exactly. That's what I've been, like when I'll never forget, first time I met Dabo, which was at one of his practices. And, I went out, this was like the Friday before they played Notre Dame down there a few years ago.
Oh, I'm a Notre Dame fan, Todd. Don't do that to me. Tough game.
And so the coach told him I was there. He knew I was going to be there. He comes, across the field like and he was just like, man, it's so great to meet you. He's like, that book is just exactly how I do. I mean, I've been told more people that, you know, I mean, you could just hear Dabo, like a genuine, just like,
Yeah, wow.
that's how we, you know, and he's always been like that around it. And so, you know, guys like that, and Tony's got the same heart. He's just cut from a different cloth. Tony's like
Yeah, right.
deep and just really,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to meet those guys, and I haven't been able to spend as much time with that. I mean, he's allowed me to speak to his team last 3 seasons and his coaches last couple seasons too. So that's been really, I love that. I love being around Clemson and meeting some of those guys. But I haven't been around him quite as much. I mean, I get to talk to him when I'm there and stuff. But like Tony, I've been able to be around and spend good quality time with. And that dude just, you know, he's just become a really good friend. And I just have so much respect for what he does, how he does it. And, you know, he's a quiet guy. He's not out and, you know, he's not somebody that's looking to be out all over the place and doing, he uses his platform in a wise way, but, you know, but yeah, I just, those are 2 really cool experiences. But, you know, naturally early on in the journey, you know, it's 2011 when Urban Meyer reached out to me, and that was,
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah.
you know, my, like Urban Meyer, you know, and I find myself, you know, I had a couple different meetings with him. I was down at his house to shoot a video, and then end up, you know, a couple times a year we'd go visit him for a while. And, you know, it was surreal for me for a long time to be sitting across from him or somebody like that, have him asking me questions.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, the only thing I do is walk away and go, man, if you don't believe in God, you're nuts. I got a story for you, because there's no way I should be sitting across. You know, that's a God thing, a cool God thing. And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So those have been really, I'm thankful. I feel very, very blessed
Yeah.
for what he's, you know, what he's orchestrated, because there's no way that I, you know, could have orchestrated this journey.
Yep.
I had no idea it would be what it is today, or I'd be where I am, been able to do what I've done. So God gets the credit big time on that.
Yeah, for sure. Good for you. Yeah, I guess I want to dive into a couple questions that maybe they're apparent to me, possibly what your answer could be, but I want to give a shout out to this book study right now, because these guys we're at the point where I think these questions, you alluded to them a little bit earlier, but
John Snell, by the way,
yeah,
I
that's
get to
right.
give a shout out to my buddy John.
There you go.
Man, I love that dude. Awesome. Was just an awesome coach, now an awesome administrator, and
yeah,
what
for
a
sure.
heart. What a heart. I mean, the dude he gets the whole, and he's as intense as anyone.
Right.
But he's love that dude.
Yeah, it's been great getting to know him more. And so I think these might be geared towards you specifically. And you touched, like I said, on this a little bit earlier. What is, and like I said, I think I know this answer, but what is your why? You know, and has that changed at all throughout this process? Is it different today than what it was when you started the book? You know, what is it right now, Todd?
Well, there's a couple answers to that I give you. That, you know, number one, I mean, I wrote a purpose statement, you know, probably, I want to say it's probably been 14, 12, 13, 14 years ago now, that, and I don't even have it. It's a paragraph. I don't have it completely memorized. I just know the gist of it is, as a man of God, I want to lead my family, lead the people God's put in my life, ultimately, in the way that he's called me to lead them, putting their relationships first, being there for them, making sure that I am first and foremost that light that I am called to be in their lives, and then a light that I'm called to be in all the lives that God puts in my path along the way in my journey, no matter what that means. And so that first and foremost, you know, that I look at that, you know, on occasion, but I try to keep that my true north. But the other part of that answer is, I always believe there's 2 parts. You know, there's a why you do what you do, and then there's why are you here on this earth, and you have to keep those 2 aligned. The why, the doing part of your purpose is going to change over the course of your life. It's going to change consistently. I tell people, gifts, passions, and opportunities. Look, all 3 of those things are different now than they were when I was 20. They're different now than they were when I was 30. They're different now than when I was 40. At 40, I wrote this book. You know, I had different gifts, talent, you know, gifts, passions and opportunities. I'm 50 now, but think of what, what God has, the experiences he's taken me through in the last 10 years now, and so those things change, but the why I'm here on this earth doesn't. That's the constant. It's always about relationships. It's always about pouring into the people that God's put in your life. And first and foremost, if you're married, you got a spouse. Look, that's your first priority here on this earth. If you have kids, that's the most important thing you do for your kids. Number one, love your spouse. And so that's the inner concentric circle. And then it goes out from there. And the people that you have the chance to work with, that you're mentoring, and then all others that I think one of the challenges there is a lot of times we tend to, especially in our society today, we're such a quid pro quo society. It's you give me and I'll give you, and it's, it's a networking society or whatever. And so we have a tendency sometimes to lose sight of the importance of these divine appointments, or these people that God puts in our lives that can do nothing for us. And, that's, I think, a big thing that's missing in society a lot of times today. And that's one of the things that I've really tried to, as hard as it is, tried the best I can to be true to, and to pour out into people that, whatever it is. I got a lot of people in my life, and that gets hard because you get pulled in a ton of different directions a lot. And I thought I could do that nonstop at one point. And, it was just like, oh my gosh, you get overwhelmed sometimes. But at the same time, I've really tried to do the best that I can with, I've got people, a couple kids in this town that growing up in a really, really bad situation. And they years ago would pop into my office once in a while because I'd talk to them. And, I just try to and it would be in the most inopportune times. But the example that I'd tell people is like, look, God knows if I spend an hour with them, he's going to take care of the stuff on the other side. If he put him in my office today, then I'm going to, and so I think that's from a core purpose standpoint. I think we just, it's a hard thing to do in our society today, but I think, again, you got to keep those relationships front, center, or foundational, I should say.
Yeah, so good. I think another question that comes up to us maybe earlier in the book is, what are you willing to sacrifice? And I'd even have a rebuttal in this discussion the other day. I would also ask, what am I not willing to sacrifice? Where do you fall at, underneath that umbrella, if you will?
Yeah, I think I think each of us has to definitely deal with that based upon our, our specific circumstances. But, for me, even this journey has been, last 10 years have been by far the hardest years of my life in terms of career.
Wow.
Most people look at what I do, and a lot of times, oh my gosh, it's gotta be, they see a picture of me on the sidelines at a Clemson football game and go, I want to be where that guy is someday. And they have no idea how, I mean, like I said, it has been, again, like I said, the most challenging, difficult time of my career these last 10 years. So what am I willing to sacrifice? One of the reasons is because you have to travel some.
Yeah.
How much can you travel? Well, if you don't travel, you don't eat, or your family, I should say, doesn't eat. And so, you have to find that balance. And, at one point you will make sacrifices based on that, because I won't sacrifice my family for this journey, because I did that before when I was in my 30s. And so now, at the age of 32, 33, I made kind of a commitment to God, a surrender point where it was like, I'm not gonna leave them behind. So, I think you make those commitments, and I think, you have to figure out ways to stay true to those commitments, because, there's no doubt, I get asked all the time too, this journey with the book, how do you do what you do and stay true to what you're teaching, Todd? And
right.
It's hard. It's the hardest thing in the world. And the fact is I'm not driving a brand new $100,000 car. Far from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not living in a mansion. And that's, that's just the thing that sometimes you have to kind of choose your path and feel like where you're called to be, and you make the sacrifices. For me, for sure, the way the book came out, I knew it wasn't by accident. I knew it wasn't just hey, Todd wrote this cool book, now I got to build my platform. It was, wow, God gave you this, Todd, don't screw it up.
Yeah, right.
So follow it, be obedient, and watch, I'll take care of things. And that's how it's been. The book it's never been like this, but it's also never stopped. It's just always steady.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sure when I get on the other side someday, God will explain to me why. Because I sure think it'd be a lot easier if 20 million copies sold and I could have my own private jet I could leave every day and be home for dinner.
There you go.
But that wasn't the plan, evidently. So, but
hey, I just want to wrap up here and be respectful of your time. Maybe a couple culture things before we go into the rapid fire. What are some, I think you touched on some things that would exist in healthy cultures. What are some things that, some mistakes that you're seeing that people are making when trying to build a culture and to inject that into their business, their team, whatever that might be?
The biggest one by far would be they try to just ram values through the system. So, hey, who do we want to be here? These are our pillars. Okay, everybody come in, team meeting. I decided that respect, loyalty, love, these are going to be what these are the pillars. This is very important to me. Don't do anything outside of these. Goodbye. And the reality is, and this happens way more often than not. And I tell teams all the time too. I can't tell you how many teams I've been in their locker rooms. Every team has tons of great things, by the way, painted all over their locker rooms. We don't do this. We respect this. But the funny thing is I've left teams and 2 weeks later, I've been watching ESPN and I see this kid got in trouble for such and such. And all of a sudden I'm going, well, that's funny. I saw a sign on the locker room door that said they don't do that.
Right.
But, why did he do that? Well, here's why he did that. Number one, he's a kid. That's okay, some grace. But the other thing is did we really take the time to help him internalize that value? Did we really take the time to listen to him and find out where he is in his own values and help him find his way to an alignment with that value? And we just don't do that. We don't do that enough in businesses, and we don't do that enough in teams. Coaches, they don't ever have the time. And let me tell you, like right now, what we're going through as a country, not only COVID, but the challenges that we're facing with disunity and division and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I've been saying for a long time, and it's been stirred in my heart, that guys, there's skill set, mindset, heart set. This is what we teach. This is what I teach. Skill set, mindset, heart set. You spend 95% of your time on skill set. You bring in your mental coaches and your sports psychologists to deal with, or your mental health coaches to deal with the mindset stuff. You leave 1% for heart set. But 90% of your problems are going to be heart set issues. And and here's what I tell coaches. Okay, let's use the example. A kid's late all the time. He's selfish. At the root of most of doing this or doing that, it's selfish. If it was a mindset issue, I could say, hey, kid, you're selfish. And he'd go, oh, okay, I'll stop being selfish. All of us know that doesn't work.
Right.
If anybody's ever coached, taught, led, parented, it doesn't work. Why? Because it's not a mindset issue. It's a heart set issue. You got to get to the heart. That takes time. And the values are one of the things. You're trying to build a culture. You don't build a culture by, hey, here's the words. This is what we're going to stand by. Or even taking the group of leaders and going, here's what we're going to stand by, and then here, guys, here you go, throw it out. Because it causes resentment. Sometimes It causes, people are like, yeah, whatever. You got some of them that are living by it, some of them that aren't. So really taking the time to dive into heart stuff, probably the biggest challenge that I see from a cultural standpoint, sports and business.
So what would you say finally, well, one follow-up to that, Todd, what would you say to the people out there, the coaches that still believe the X's and O's are bigger and better than the culture, more important, and the business people who are most driven by, hey, bottom line, and, you know, if people don't stick with us and we lose them, so be it. What would you say to those people to convince them otherwise to get what you're really, truly talking about here? Because I get it, but I think there's some people still that would challenge you on that, right?
Well, here's the reality. You got to define what success is for you. So when you talk about bottom line or you talk about wins and losses, there's more ways. What I'm telling you about culture right there, that's if you want to build a culture where you minimize those issues. You truly have people pulling together. You truly have people that trust each other and that are functioning for the right reasons. And, you know, you achieve results that way. You can operate with hatchet treasure and still achieve results. I could name you, and I bet people are thinking of some of them. I could name you 2 or 3 football teams, football coaches right now. They're phenomenal at it. They're phenomenal. There is a huge treasure. Kids go there. They know they're going to have a chance to win. They know they're going to go to the NFL. You know, I mean, the treasure is huge. So the hatchet can be huge too, because that's it. And I'm not saying there's no relationship at all there, but that's what it's about. And quite frankly, you can win that way. I just believe, and Dabo and Tony have proven it. And there's other coaches out there, by the way, that are proving it too. Those are just 2 of the most recent big ones. But I tend to believe that you can win this other way too, by making sure that the relationships and the internalization of the values and the kids really understand they're learning more about how to be the best that they can be for their future. And so I can teach a kid discipline and hard nose, and I can build a monster that just tears apart somebody across the line from them. But at some point, that individual more than likely is going to walk into an office. They're going to be a school teacher or a salesperson,
Yep.
or whatever it is. And there's going to be somebody in a conversation across the line from them that they disagree with. Are we teaching them the hard stuff that's truly going to help them function? Or are we it's monsters or warriors?
Yep,
That's
yep.
the way I teach it. To build monsters or warriors. So, you know, again, like I said, the answer, it's a long answer, I know, and there's a lot more to it. But I would tell you, if success to you is just winning, if success to you is the bottom line, I will admit there's tons of examples out there of winning and making boatloads of money by, you know, hardcore, whatever, however you want to. But I would also throw in one more caveat, that my belief is the way, from an athletic standpoint and even from a business standpoint, the generation that is entering the workforce, entering these sports teams, and even starting to grow in the workforce, that generation, the biggest portion of those, I should say, those generations, the largest majority of them will function better and desire something that's real, something that's relationship based. They're not fooled by this stuff, and they're starting to have less and less tolerance for it. And so you can keep operating that way if you want.
Right.
My guess is you're going to continue to see a shift in those results too down the line. So that's just
sure.
one guy's opinion.
Hey, that's good stuff. I'd like to say, hey, we're going to do a rapid fire here, 3-pointers. I'm going to dish it to you on the wing, and you fire away here, all right? Number one, if people could learn one thing from this talk, you know, just take something away, what would you want it to be?
Man, ask yourself, keep your why you do what you do, aligned with why you're here on this earth, and man, reflect on it and ask it every week, throughout the week, because it's easy for me too. It's easy for all of us to lose sight of that.
Yeah, great. Next thing, if you could have come over here and been in my shoes, what would have you asked Todd today that I did not ask?
Oh, Uh, that's a great question, but I don't know. You've asked me some really good questions today. I mean, I'm just gonna give props to you and say
I appreciate it.
you've asked the good ones. We've gotten to some really good stuff, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and finally, we do call this good stuff. So whether or not you want to pinpoint, some of the things that are going on in the world today, or just in general, what's some good stuff you can leave our listeners with, please?
I think it's especially right now, and again, on the heels of what is going on in our world today with divisiveness. Look, I don't have all the answers. I don't, and I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know where they're found, and I do know that we have to listen, we have to empathize, we have to all learn to have a posture of humility, um, even a posture of repentance and confession, and asking for forgiveness where it's needed, and then also, depending on where we are on that, also having a posture of humility and willingness to forgive. That's our call biblically. That's our call, and all the other things, and there's so many other things that go with that. I realize that, but my prayer, my hope is all my friends is I just believe we have to have a posture of humility when we join together and go, how do we love each other as we are truly called to love each other as we pursue, the need for changes and that will fix some of these things that we do need to fix. But we got to go at it with a posture of humility and love.
Well, there you go, man. You nailed it at the buzzer. So appreciate
Nice.
that. And hey, how to give us some ways that people can stay connected to you? I know your social media, just a book in general. Can you let them know, please?
Yeah, most everything that I'm on, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or any of these things down here. Todd Gongwer is that's how it's at Todd Gongwer on Twitter, and I think it's Todd.Gongwer on Instagram. Todd Gongwer, and there's a Lead for God's Sake Facebook page too that I'd encourage him to join. And then of course, the book's available. It's in most stores throughout the country, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. But the easiest way, obviously, to get it is grab it on Amazon or any of those other online retailers. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, Todd, I just want to thank you personally for the book. I know it's impacted my life, and it still is. Now reading it again with this, I wouldn't have met this group of people and maybe even been here today with you if it wasn't for that. So thank you for that. Thanks a ton for taking the time out. I really appreciate you speaking from the heart and pouring into others today. It means a lot.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to share and to be on, and appreciate what you're doing. And I'm going to have to, I think I told John, but I'm going to have to jump on. Hopefully I'll get to jump on when you guys are at the end of that
that'd be great.
book study. So
yeah, for sure.
Love to join you guys.
Yeah, well, we wish you nothing but the best, and God bless you moving forward. I thank everybody for joining us today. As always, it's one thing to listen to this message. I think it's another to apply it. So best of luck with that. And I can't wait to hear all the ways that, Todd's input has affected you today. But until next time, good stuff.